Hello and welcome, everyone. It's wonderful to see you here. Before we get started, I'd just like to acknowledge and celebrate the fact that I'm coming to you from the lands and the airwaves of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, pay my respects to elders, past and present, and also extend my respects and acknowledgements to any First Nations peoples present. It's an extraordinary thing to be on the lands that have been under guardianship for more than 20,000 years. In a way, security is about guardianship, and so First Nations peoples are the original guardians of the land. My name is Danielle Piper. I'm the academic convener here at the National Security College. I'm really delighted to be joined by some wonderful colleagues, and I'll introduce them briefly. By way of background, as I mentioned, I'm an academic here, but I also have a background in policy, including in the Queensland, New South Wales and Commonwealth governments. I've been in legal practice before, and my areas of research intersect with national security in a bunch of ways. I'm passionate about lots of different things, but particularly about the relationship between the state and the individual. And that is what brings me to national security, because that's at the core of what we're talking about, that relationship. I'm joined tonight by Professor Rory Medcalf AM, who's the head of the ANU National Security College. Hi, Rory. Jake Blight will be joining us in a moment. He is, amongst other things, the former Deputy General of Inspector Intelligence and Security, and so he'll be coming to chat. He's one of our teaching staff here, among other things. Dr. Mike Cohen, who's one of our senior lecturers and also our PhD convener. We also are very lucky to have Rachael Falk here. So as an alumna, thank you, welcome Rachael. Alumna, and also someone who's had an extraordinary career and working on so many interesting projects. So really looking forward to hearing about Rachael's perspective, both as a student and now as a graduate. Also really stoked to have Liz Ingram here. Liz is one of those people who are the engine room of the university, keep things going, and she'll have all the useful answers. Most of us academics will talk at you about concepts, but Liz will have all the useful detailed information. So the idea of this evening is to provide you with a bit of perspective about what studying at the ANU National Security College might look like, to answer any questions that you might have, and just generally to be available to see if we can chat more about what life here is like. So just some minor housekeeping. This session is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube and other forms of social media, just an FYI. It is in seminar mode though, so as guests, our guests can't be seen on the screen, but just to mention that, for example, a question would be recorded. There is some time at the end allocated for Q&A. If you don't mind using the raise your hand function, or you can use the Q&A function. The normal chat function you'd see on a Zoom is not is disabled at present, but you can use the Q&A function. And my wonderful media and communications colleague Olivia Kim is here too to help assist with that. So you can use either of those methods to ask a question, and please reach out. We're really happy to take them. So before we move on to chatting to some of our alumni and academics, I'd like to hand over to the head of our college, who is also one of our teachers as well, very multi-talented there. Head over to Professor Rory Medcalf by way of a few words of introduction.
Look, thank you very much, Danielle, and it's a real pleasure to be here. And I echo and endorse not only all of the fine things you said about our team, but also your acknowledgement of country. So a couple of thoughts to just begin the conversation. One is to demystify a little bit about what the National Security College is, what our mission is, and where really the academic opportunities, the opportunity to study with us and to research with us, where that fits into our mission and hopefully into your career paths or your plans and options for your own futures. I'll say a little bit about where the academic program fits within the college and why I think our degrees, and I'll focus particularly on the Master of National Security Policy, are really about that, I think that convergence of academic rigor and policy practice that makes the National Security College special and really fits the college and fits our graduates to the real challenges of the security environment out there, the rather confronting situation facing Australia and indeed facing the world. So I'll quickly race through those few things and then really look forward to hearing from the rest of the panel here, academic colleagues, and also I think Rachael in particular, not only as an alum of the National Security College, but as a leading voice in your field, Rachael, in cyber security as well. So the National Security College is special because although it's part of the ANU, a great university as a teaching and research university, it's also a partnership with the Australian government. Our mission, as the sign behind me reminds us every day, is engaging minds for a secure Australia, or for really a secure future for Australia. And we do that uplift of the nation through all forms of education, development, training, and the contestability of ideas. So in addition to the academic program and the degree program, we do an enormous amount of executive and professional development for Australian government officials and for other audiences as well, very contemporary. So looking at the whole spectrum of issues from climate and resilience through defence, intelligence, the submarine program that a few of you have probably read or heard about, AUKUS, challenges to social cohesion, new technologies, disruptive technologies, a whole spectrum of work. We also do some work that I guess resonates with what think tanks do in encouraging an inclusive public debate about national security, and also helping decision makers work behind closed doors with options and ideas. But most importantly for our conversation tonight, we're about growing new generations of policy and security thinkers and practitioners, scholars and doers, and sometimes scholars are doers as well, as I'm sure my academic colleagues would agree. And so we're really proud that our degree is, I think, producing people who are ready for careers or who are enhancing careers that already exist, whether that's in government, in the national security workforce, in policy, in intelligence, in implementation, in operations, whether it's in defence forces, or whether it's in civil society. So there are so many roles, obviously, in civil society, in NGOs, in the corporate and business sector that intersect with national security. And even if you simply want to be an informed consumer of policy, someone who can be a critic and who can engage thoughtfully and constructively with what governments are doing in your name or in our names. And I think our degree is there to really equip you much better. And of course, if your chosen path is an academic or a research career, then the degree will advance you in that way as well. And so the model that we bring, and we'll hear more about this from colleagues in a moment, is a signature pedagogy that combines, as I said, academic rigor with policy practice. In other words, the degree includes courses that combine theory and concepts and methods on the one hand with the realities of making national security policy, often in the very messy and complicated democratic frameworks that countries like Australia have to navigate to ensure that policy is durable, is sustainable, brings together values and interests, and really captures the politics of the thing as well. In your degree, you will encounter leading scholars and researchers, but you will also see them working and teaching alongside experienced senior policy practitioners. So we can look at how the concepts you study meet real world challenges. The assessment is, I think, diverse. So you'll encounter traditional forms of academic assessment, but also activities that really test your policy and communication skills and grow those skills as we go along. And because we're located in Canberra, in Australia's national capital, you will get unparalleled access to policymakers and policy thinkers in government and in those circles around government. But even if you're joining us virtually, we make sure that we give you as much access as we can to, if you like, the Canberra policy world in our virtual offerings as well. I might pause there. The subjects in our degree, the courses in our degree, range that full spectrum, and we're very open to as much flexibility as we can with electives from other parts of the university as well, so you can really tailor the degree to your needs. But I think I might pause and hear from colleagues and particularly the alumni voice as to what the degree can mean for you. So thank you again, Danielle.
Thanks very much, Rory. And just to echo what Rory has said there about the unique features of this degree being both exposure to academic experts who have rigorous academic backgrounds and are out there leading research and what have you, but also getting exposure to practitioners. And so half of our teaching team, not half, but we have components of our teaching team that are practitioners and components that are academics, and many, as Rory said, who cross into both. In terms of, I might just speak briefly now about what it might look like when you do your degree, and then I'll call on my colleagues to speak a little bit about their experiences and expertise. As Rory mentioned, we have a Master's of National Security Policy. We also have a Graduate Certificate of National Security Policy as well. And it's also possible to do a PhD here, which we'll speak to, Mike will speak to briefly in a moment. In terms of what it looks like, so we have in-person classes available. We often schedule those in the evenings, understanding that a lot of our student body have other commitments and working lives and so on and so forth. So we're pretty flexible and accommodating around that. We also have capacity to deliver our classes online, either separately or at the same time, so that we can build a community between our online students and our in-person students. So we offer that flexibility, of course, because this is the reality of the world where we're at. In terms of the assessment that you might undertake, some of it's the classical write a research essay, so on and so forth, but our educators are very innovative around their assessments, and I'll get them to talk to that in more detail soon. But just to give you an example, Rory's designed an assessment where you get to apply a security lens to a speech. Mike engages students in war games. Jake has them standing before a parliamentary committee and so on and so forth. Another one of our colleagues gets you to do an op-ed. I'll ask my students to do parliamentary submissions and so on and so forth. So there's both that theoretical rigor, but also practical exercises that can prepare you career-wise as well as challenge you to think and engage with the content. Our staff are interdisciplinary, so I've sometimes joked that we're a little bit like the Power Rangers. We all bring our special skills. So we have legal experts, historians, international relations scholars, political scientists, and so forth. And of course, being at ANU, we have the capacity to draw on experts in the sciences, for example, in climate sciences, colleagues who have skills and expertise in gender studies, and so on. So it's a cool program, I've got to tell you. I'm biased, obviously, but it does offer a really diverse and rigorous experience. That said, and I'm happy to take any more questions as well, but that said, I might move and introduce and open the floor to some of my colleagues. If you don't mind, I might start with our alumna and ask you, Rachael, if you don't mind, just explaining a little bit about what your job is now and what your career trajectory has been like, if you don't mind.
Thanks, and thanks very much for having me back at the National Security College. For the last 5 years, I have been the CEO of the Cybersecurity Cooperative Research Centre. So that's we're a private company, but we have a Commonwealth grant over 7 years, and we work with universities, 6 universities and Data 61, not ANU, I might add. We work with industry and government, and we come together on cybersecurity projects that have really commercial outcomes, so they're industry-based. But the academics are invested because they do the research, but they also get to do the good things like write papers, which is what academics like to do, and to progress their academic careers. And I've been in that role for 5 years. In terms of my career trajectory, I was a lawyer for 15 years. I did the standard work through private practice, and then I was a legal counsel at Telstra for quite a long time, but decided to be seconded to the cybersecurity area, sort of security operations at the time. And really, it was a deliberate choice to not be a lawyer anymore. And literally the day I moved over, I enrolled in a Master's of National Security Policy at National Security College. Importantly, because for me, when you're a lawyer, lawyers tend to think in a very deliberate way. I've been a litigation lawyer, and I wanted to shed that skin, and I really wanted to push myself to do something different, and wanted to do this degree because I wanted to learn more about policy and the policy mindset. We had at the time some, complex issues. It was the time of metadata being introduced, so 2014-15. There were lots of changes. Huawei had just been excluded from the NBN bid. So, in fact, I know geopolitically it's a very sort of, well, some would argue, quite an interesting or perilous time. But back then, the national security arena was no different. There were lots of big challenges introduced sort of in the last decade when it came to cybersecurity and national security. And now today, in my role, I am on the Home Affairs Minister, Claire O'Neill, has appointed an expert advisory board for the cybersecurity strategy. And I'm on that with Andy Penn, the former CEO of Telstra, and Mel Hupfeld, the former Chief of Air Force. And I think what's interesting now is the Prime Minister launched the discussion paper that we put together for this cybersecurity strategy at a roundtable. And the Prime Minister said cybersecurity is national security. And I think that's really important. And I think what's changed, so it vindicates my decision to do the Masters, is so much is now seen through the national security lens. So what the Prime Minister is absolutely right. In a lot of ways, cybersecurity is national security. And I've spent many years, and you named a few things that you get students to do in assessments. I've done all those in real life before the PJCIS. Often I've drafted op-eds that have been published, briefing ministers. So, and we did have some pretty unusual assessments when I was at National Security College, but all that and more awaited me. But I don't think I knew that at the time. I just think I wanted to shed a skin and do something that intellectually challenged me. And I certainly got that and more doing my Masters.
I think Rachael's made some really important points there that I just sort of like to draw out. And one of those is that national security is no longer sort of conceived in the traditional just about bombs and guns type thing. Because what we understand to be destabilizing society and destabilizing to the safety of a nation is much broader than that, and can include stuff like social cohesion and climate and so on and so forth. So I think that's a really important point. I think the other point I draw out from Rachael right there is the shedding skin analogy. I think the Masters of National Security Policy here at ANU is a really good bridging degree, in the sense of it's not closed off to any particular discipline. And so I have students at the moment that have science, medical, law, or IR or political science backgrounds. And so we're not talking just to one audience. So it doesn't matter if you're not a lawyer, it doesn't matter if you're not a security practitioner, it doesn't matter if you're coming from the sciences or from IR. Once you get in, we're actually speaking to you in a fairly accessible and also interdisciplinary way. I was just thinking the other day, I had a class and I had a panel speaking to my class, and one was the former Attorney General, one was a scientific expert, and the other was a privacy and policy and security practitioner at Department of Home Affairs. So we've got the broad gamut there. And thanks for those initial comments, Rachael. I will come back to you in a moment about some examples of particular aspects of the degree. I might at this point bring in Jake and Mike. So Jake, would you just mind briefly outlining your career to date and just have a quick chat about what areas you teach here at the NSC?
Yes, also, hi everyone, I'm Jake. So my career as a lawyer started, like many lawyers, I was working on constitutional administrative law. 9/11 happened. And suddenly I was the only lawyer in AGS with a security clearance, just about. So I rapidly progressed into a specialist career in national security. And 20 years later, I was still doing specialist national security law. I've been the general counsel in 2 intelligence agencies. I've been the deputy and acting inspector general of intelligence and security. So I'm very much on the practitioner end. And it won't be a great surprise, I teach the national security law subject. What's a little different about this subject, though, is it's really directed at non-lawyers. If you're going to work in the national security space, whether it's a policy officer or an intelligence officer or an official, you're going to run up against a lot of legislation, a lot of domestic law. And this course that I teach on national security law for policymakers is intended to give you an overview so you know enough to find the right laws, to know what you're talking about when you ask good questions of those you're working with. So we do a lot of practical exercises on finding and using legislation, as to how statutory interpretation works, what the heck admin law is and why you might care. And we focus on very practical kinds of assessments, including, as Danielle said, the role of lawyers and policy lawyers and officials before the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security when it's in its lawmaking mode. So that committee reviews pretty much all national security bills, and the course is geared to help people prepare to be part of attending one of those hearings or briefing people for those hearings and answering the kinds of questions the parliamentary committee might answer. There's a snapshot. Danielle, do you have questions you'd like me to elaborate on?
Great. Yeah, no, you've actually just reminded me, Jake, in discussing his subjects, reminded me that we do have quite a broad variety of electives. We have a couple of core subjects, one focused on concepts and methods, and that's essentially to bring everyone up to speed so that we're all operating on essentially an equal platform, regardless of what your previous study or your previous career was. So we're all speaking the same language. And then following on from that, there's another compulsory one, which is very practical and geared at transitioning into policy and understanding how policy is made and how policy works. And then we have a variety of electives, everything from national security law to climate and security to ethics and philosophy and security, and also subjects that consider things as complex as coercion, which brings me to my other colleague, Dr. Mike Cohen. So Mike, do you mind just speaking briefly to your areas of research and teaching expertise and just talking a little about what you teach at into the master's program?
Yeah, thanks, Danielle, and great to be with you and be with you all. So yeah, I have a PhD in political science and international relations, and so a lot of my earlier research looked at nuclear weapons proliferation and international conflict, and I'm now doing a lot of work on alliances and interstate conflict. Regarding the courses I teach at the NSC, I'm teaching a course currently called Coercion, and I think that's very important because coercion has become an increasingly prevalent and widespread part of the international system, yet it's something that many of us know very little about. It's obviously becoming front and center in Australian foreign and defence strategic documents. For many of you that may have looked at the recent defence strategic review and the previous defence strategic update, talk a lot about deterring and responding with force. This is the language of coercion, but it's something that we in Australia for a long time have probably not known as much about as we should have. And so the course is a full 12-week treatment on conventional coercion, coercion by middle powers, whether nuclear weapons help you coerce, whether economic dependency leaves you open to coercion, and how states can deal or respond to coercion.
Now, Mike, you in teaching your subject also run a war game assessment or activity. Could you just explain that briefly?
Yeah, that's correct. And I guess the reason for the war game is that we're very mindful that different students learn in different ways. And so some will learn by seminars, some will learn by writing more traditional analytic essays, some will learn by more policy responses. But to sort of add, the assumption is that if we give you as many different ways to learn as possible, that maximizes the chance that everyone will at least learn something. And so what we have in the Coercion course is an interactive war game that is designed to facilitate and build on the content in class. So in the Coercion class, for the first 5 weeks, we look at coercion in all its various formats. And then in week 6, the students are divided into 6 country groups. and they're given a realistic scenario, which I probably aren't telling you too much, in that in the course in this iteration, it involves South Korea making signals that it was intent on developing nuclear weapons, and the North Koreans, the Americans, the Japanese, etc., dealing, coercing, counter-coercing, and responding to that. Then in the second half of the semester, we continue the course, and then after that, the war game returns, and we continue on that. So it's really designed to provide another medium for students to learn, often quite complex and challenging, but I would argue really fascinating and important material.
That's a really good point. There's a lot of scholarship out there and studies that suggest that although we might have a dominant learning style, we might be more of a visual learner or an audio learner, or a kinesthetic learner. Ultimately, we're all a bit of both, and we do try in our teaching to engage with our learning partners, our students, in all sorts of different types of activities to help with that learning. So thanks for that, Mike. I might circle back now to Rachael. So you've sort of spoken to this a little bit already, but could you give an example of something you found quite helpful while you were studying your Masters of National Security here, in terms of either the assessment or the content, and how it might have helped transition and prepare you for, you know, the extraordinary things you've done since?
So yeah, there's quite a few examples actually. I don't know if you still offer a unit where it allows you, it used to be the 8022, where it allows you to do an 8,000 word essay, I think, over a semester, and you could just pick your own adventure. I remember at the time I was pretty fascinated by the banning of Huawei from the NBN build. I was at Telstra, not that that had any relevance other than I understood telcos. And I was pretty fascinated because there was no public commentary on why that ban occurred. We had, so I had a whole semester really to research this, and it really uncovered at the time a bit of no narrative from the government around this. It was a very, almost like it wasn't a clandestine decision, but you literally had a significant government procurement decision. I don't want to say cloaked in secrecy, but it was very quiet. So anyway, I did the essay. I think I got to the bottom of any public statements, and I think the only one I found was the late Margot McCarthy, who was a national security advisor, who'd made a comment that it was a risk-based decision. But I really sort of honed my research skills on digging to the bottom of this, you know, high-risk vendor issue. Little did I know that in 2018, the Australian government would come out with its high-risk vendor decision under the, what is really telco security regulations called TSSR. Again, I understood what they were. And a rather fascinating very public statements by government and obviously the security agency at the time, and lots of public commentary. And I wrote a bit about that at the time. I went on a delegation to Germany and spoke quite a bit with a group, but we were often asked about that decision by the Germans. And I constantly draw on the research at the time that I did at National Security College to draw a comparison between how a government can be quite closed, but then 7 or 8 years later be very open with the decision. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't have done the research at the time. And I also did a lot of research at the time about the US approach to being very open about high-risk vendors. They did a report on ZTE at the time. And I was able to sort of talk about the evolution about the Australian sort of government, I mean, different time, different government, but the marked contrast in public narrative and what that meant for our region. So that was a really good example. And I still draw upon that today. I really wish I could find the essay, though. I had it somewhere. Now I can't. Somebody needs to find it for me.
We may be able to find it for you, Rachael. You know.
Thank you.
I think we owe you that.
Thank you. But it was a really good example about how I think what the Masters helped me with is anyone can, you know, we all read, I'm sure, and we all love, you know, doing a little bit of side research. But when you have the time and space to invest in, you know, deep research is a semester for most of us, it's not a PhD, but when you have that time and space, you really do get a strong sense of confidence, and it allows you to go into the world quite confidently later. And you're not just doing a soundbite from an article you've read. You really can say with confidence, you know, and pull this thread. And it not only helped with that, it helped, you know, other threads around metadata. And my experience with talking about Toller, and Jake will no doubt have a lot to say about that. It meant that, you know, I had the confidence and the body of knowledge to be an experienced commentator, so that when you are put on the spot at a bilateral or somebody else to come, you can actually talk with confidence about what the position was in 2010, 2011, how the Australian government moved, what the public commentary was around the high-risk vendors, for example. And that's what you get, I think, when you do a master's of national security policymaking, is because you get that ability to have walked through the units. And with, I don't know if you still offer 8022, I could be setting up a lot of potential students for disappointment.
I can jump in there.
Can you offer it?
Yes. For those who aren't from ANU, there's this quirky habit everyone has in speaking in course numbers.
Yeah.
But the paper that Rachael, the subject Rachael's talking about, is essentially an opportunity to write an extended research essay, a mini thesis, so to speak. And so instead of doing coursework, some people prefer coursework because you get led through it and you can learn new things. But occasionally, like Rachael, you'll get someone who's really passionate and interested about a particular topic. And we do allow, instead of doing a coursework topic, to do a course that's semester long that allows you to do some in-depth research on a particular issue. So, for example, someone might be particularly interested in, looking at the way climate's affecting security policy in Tuvalu, and they can follow that through in a way you might not be able to do in a normal sort of 2,000-3,000 word coursework essay. I think, Rachael's also made the point there about the intersection, the importance of deep thinking and the capacity to do that. And that's the beauty of having an intersection between academy and decision makers and academy and government, because you really need both. You need your thinkers and your doers, and your thinkers and your doers need to talk to one another. So thanks for drawing that out, Rachael. I'll pivot now to Jake, and I will come back. Pivot now to Jake. How do you think your background working in national security informs your teaching here?
One is, it's very practical. Like I'm the kind of lawyer that wants to speak in English, wants to get things resolved, and wants to help people ask better questions. So the course is really geared around how to be practical in this area. And I'm not exploring areas of law that are obscure and fascinating to academics. I'm exploring areas of law that affect the everyday lives of intelligence officers, security officers, of police, and of the policy officials guiding their work. So the very practical application of questioning warrants, interception warrants, surveillance warrants, the kind of powers that these agencies have. So it's very practical, and that's informed by my own experience of working in these areas. My own experience also lets me dig out and give to students the public sources, the legitimate, lawful public sources of information about what intelligence agencies actually do. These are quite often hidden in obscure reports, but we use a lot of these obscure reports to get insight into how laws are actually used. And the other way that it informs my teaching is that I drag in a lot of my friends. And as Rory said, Canberra is a great place. So we've had former chair of the parliamentary committee last week. Next week, we've got one of the country's leading barristers in terrorism prosecution. We've had 2 former director generals of ASIO and a former attorney general, former head of defence. There's quite a packed guest list for this kind of course that you wouldn't get at a different university, I don't think. And that's informed by the links we have to other practitioners and senior officials in Canberra.
Great. Those who've typed questions in the chat, I promise we're not ignoring you. I have seen them, and we will definitely get to them. They're good questions. So we will get to those. I guess I'll just sneakily answer one now. The other one's probably best answered by Liz in due course. But there was a question when we were talking about the different learning exercises before, trying to keep them interactive. Jake's parliamentary committee hearing, Mike's war games, and so on and so forth. Will online students get those experiences? And so my answer is yes. There are obvious physical barriers, but we get around those. Most of you will know that the Zoom platform has breakout rooms, and so we can still conduct group activities via Zoom, and we find ways of bringing the online community into our activities as well. So it's got its obvious physical limitations, but it's actually, this is the one silver lining to come out to COVID, is that we're all quite good at doing this now, and it does enable flexible learning models. So I'll definitely, we'll come back to the other one. Before I sort of hand over to Liz, who is the useful person, you're all very useful as well, but she has all the technicalities. Can I just whip around the room, the metaphorical room, so to speak, starting with Rachael, about whether you would have a tip or two for a student who was considering undertaking study at the National Security College?
I think my tip is definitely if you want to immerse yourself in a new area or you want to think deeply and you want to learn a whole bunch of new things. But my tip is also, it depends if you're Canberra based, the cohorts you study with are really interesting people and they can come from government departments. So if you also want, and I'm not saying networking because I think that's not what I mean, but you get to immerse yourself. So if you can be here and that's great, or even online, I think that's a tip. You've got to be ready to study. So my other practical tip is you really need to want to study, because studying at night, if you're working full time, is a commitment. But I can assure you the rewards are immense. And I don't think there would be a week that goes by where I don't think about my time at National Security College. And, you know, as Rory knows, I have always wanted to explore a PhD as well. So I think the tip is it's kind of lifelong learning. And if you love lifelong learning, you know, it was one of the best things I ever did.
Rachel, we'll dig out your essay if you come to a PhD. How about that?
All right, fine.
Here we are, recruiting live.
That's right.
What about you, Jake? Do you have a tip that you might give to someone who is interested in studying at the NSC, or is there any other comments you'd like to make briefly?
Law topic, we've got students who are working full-time in the intelligence community and doing this course, you know, one course at a time, and we've got students who are full-time doing the masters and nothing else. And it's actually a good mix. So I'd say do it and do some electives that take you out of your comfort zone. Use it as an opportunity to stretch your knowledge, to learn about areas that you're really not even sure quite what they are, because you'll probably learn some quite interesting and adventurous things. And it's all relevant to this really important stake in our society, this important field of national security.
Great, Jake. Yeah, and absolutely, we're quite flexible with electives. We do have our list of own NSC-owned electives, but we also have good relationships with other faculties and some cross-listed electives, and so they can be approved on an ad hoc case-by-case basis too, if there's something you're really passionate about and would like to do that. Mike, any tips for a student thinking about studying, or anything else you'd like to add before we move to Liz?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one philosophy underlying all of my teaching at the NSC is to make you better and Rory touched on this, make you better consumers of policy, so you can then be better producers, or at least debaters of policy later. So I guess the one thing and this sort of touches on what Rachael said, if you come to study at the NSC, get ready to strap yourself in for a pretty intense ride, because we're going to take you on some pretty interesting, important, topical, and often challenging terrain. And especially for those that work in the day, you'll be busy.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And in addition to, of course, being our head of college, you're also teaching to our programs, Rory. So is there anything you'd just like to add on top of that before we move?
Yeah, I will. I mean, I agree with everything I've heard. I mean, my biggest advice to students is precisely that point about move beyond your comfort zones. Look at the range of electives we offer, you know, I mean, things like geoeconomics, law, ethics, technology, climate, gender, energy, intelligence. How Canberra works, it's a mystery to me, but we're working on that. You know, and really challenge yourself, build those networks. And I think even if you come from a background where you've had deep immersion in strategy or international relations or political science, that's all good. Bring that with you, but don't just stick there, because the employers that we deal with need that diversity of skills, and we will help you get there. The other point is matching to career opportunities. So I think not only through the presenters that we put into the room for you to interact with, but also you'll find that as you study with us, you'll get to engage with other parts of the National Security College, and you'll almost inevitably have opportunities to explore careers with government that perhaps you were not even fully aware existed. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks for making that point, Rory, about challenging yourself. Stephen and Vivian, I have seen your questions, not ignoring them. We will have a Q&A session at the end, but just to where we can unpack that in more detail. But just to make a note of your point, Vivian, about studying while having children, it's certainly a huge commitment, and I don't underestimate it at all. But if it's of any comfort, we do have students studying who do have young families. And we do try to be accommodating when it comes to things like extensions, and this answers your question at the same time, Stephen, allowing part-time study. So it might not be possible for you to take on a full-time load if you have caring responsibilities for children or other family members. That certainly can be accommodated by part-time study in certain circumstances. And that's a nice segue to Liz. So I'll hand over to you now.
Thanks, Danielle. Yeah, sorry, I was just going to share my screen and just have a few little slides for the technical side in terms of the administration side of the program. But I think I might just talk to it because I think we'd like to be able to share this with colleagues who aren't here today, and also for future colleagues who might, or future students who might want to look at this later on. So I think I might just talk a little bit just about the options that are available to you. As mentioned, there is the option to study part-time and full-time, so that for both the master's and the graduate certificate. And as mentioned, the graduate certificate and the master's and the Doctor of Philosophy are available at the National Security College. Just in terms of sort of the entry requirements for it, you have the option of, I've mentioned, of studying part-time or full-time and online and very interactive. But in terms of the requirements, we do have the graduate certificate, which requires you to have a GPA of 4 out of 7 and a bachelor degree. And there are other options available there. So some people may have a wealth of, as we've seen with our colleagues here today, a wealth of experience in terms of their background. So that is also considered if you might not have that particular background. We also have in terms of the graduate certificate and the master's, if you do have a cognate background in an area, a bachelor degree that is cognate to those particular programs, then you have the option of some credit that would be available. So, and we can certainly, if you're unsure about that, we can share that with you later. And in terms of the master's program, if you go direct entry into the master's program, you're required to have a 5 out of 7 GPA and a bachelor degree as well. There is the option, if you start in the graduate certificate, that you may consider using that as a pathway into the master's program as well. So that is an option that's available for people who either don't quite meet the requirements of the master's program, or alternately, you might just be thinking, is this something for me? And, you know, you might want to test the waters a bit, and then you find that you're really enjoying yourself. So you have the option of doing the 6-month graduate certificate and then leading into the master's. And the master's program is a 1.5-year program. Again, if you do have a cognate area, then you can get credit from your bachelor degree towards a master's. So it may be that you can get credit up to 24 units, which is 6 months, and that would allow you to finish full time within 1 year. So there's lots of options there in terms of how you can come into the program. And if you are an international, you're also required to do an English test, either a TOEFL or IELTS, depending upon which country you're coming from. I think I might leave it there, Danielle. That just gives a little brief overview. And, you know, if people have questions, we can open to the floor when you want.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. Thank you, Liz. So we can open for questions now. We've taken a few and answered them as we go, but are there any others? No silly questions, by the way. And also, I'm sure that you all know, but the word cognate just means, when Liz mentioned it there, it just means that it's a degree that has some similarity with the discipline. So for example, it might be law or international relations or government or history. And that's just to get credit. There are lots of flexible options depending on your background. And my experience in dealing with Liz and other people in the student engagement team is they're not gatekeepers in any sort of nasty way. They're often quite flexible and trying to find avenues and solutions, and a great team to work with.
So Danielle, I'll just pop in here and tell you we've got a question from Jenny, and Jenny's asking if some of the courses that are part of the grad cert are the same as the ones in the masters, or whether you need to kind of, you know, do different courses to meet the requirements for one or the other.
Yes, I mean, sorry not to jump in, Liz, but yes, the short answer is you do fewer subjects, but your choices are the same. Is that right, Liz? Yes.
Yes, so you have the option of choosing quite a few in the graduate certificate, but you will be studying alongside the master's students as well. So and of course, you know, as mentioned, that counts towards credit towards your master's degree. So whatever you've taken in the graduate certificate, that will count towards your. It's I think a shorter. In terms of the programs that are, the courses that are available, I think there's a selection that are available, and then, but obviously you can count that towards your masters.
Yeah. So it's just you would do your 2 compulsories, and you would just have fewer electives to get the graduate certificate, but you could still choose from the same pool. There's not a subject that you're prohibited from taking if you're doing the grad cert as compared to the masters. You just do fewer subjects, that's all. There's a question from Ravi about PhD options, and also Kim, when you mentioned the thesis, the questions have just gone. When you mentioned the thesis pathway, are you also talking about a PhD? Perhaps you could clarify in the chat while I hand to Mike. Did you want to make any comments about the PhD pathway, Mike?
Yeah, I'll just be very brief. So firstly, yes, you can do a PhD with us. Generally, to do that, you have to have done a thesis, I think 10,000 words, and have a certain, I think it's a high second, or ideally first class honours or first class grade. But in answer to Ravi's question, the short answer is you can do a thesis on whatever you can find a supervisor who's willing to supervise you on. So that's the good news. The tougher news is that we're a reasonably small academic program. So I think on cyber, it may just be one academic that may have currently space to supervise that project. So I can put you in touch with him, and you may be able to talk further. So the short answer is yes, you can.
Sorry to cut you off, Mike, but the thing about PhD projects is they need to be quite specific, and they take some time to develop. So it's sort of something that you don't necessarily do flippantly, but might do the masters and realize that you've got a particular interest in researching something quite specific and detailed in greater depth. So there's certainly those pathways there, and we have staff that can, with relevant expertise. So Mike mentioned James, our colleague, he's a philosopher and ethicist and has expertise in cyber. We have another colleague who's a historian, for example. So depending who we've got around, we might have the expertise to support that. But do feel free to get in touch if you need to.
Yeah. Also, one other, like the PhD program is quite rigorous, and one data point that supports that is that you have to do a compulsory methods coursework, usually in the first year.
Yes, yes, to prepare you for that. They call it the PSP course, I think. Yes. Kim, I understand what you mean now. You were asking about the research thesis subject, which is similar to the subject I was talking about before, where you can write a thesis instead of doing coursework, and that will be worth a certain number of credit points, which is what Rachael mentioned she did, and certainly that is an option for you. Yes. It does need to be a substantial piece of work. The 24 unit one you're talking about, I believe the word count is about 15,000 words. So it's more like a mini thesis than a big essay. There's a tipping point, I think, around 10,000 words. 10,000 words is a big essay, and 15,000, 20,000 is getting to like a mini thesis. So yes, that is an option, but it is subject to supervisor availability, because we'd obviously have to have someone who, you were comfortable working with also, but also had the relevant expertise. But it's certainly an option, yes. Are there any other questions? No questions are silly. Promise? It'll just be my answers.
Kim's just asked a follow-up question, Danielle. Do I need to do the research thesis course for pathway to the PhD?
No. As Mike mentioned, there is a course that is run in the broader Crawford School, which the NSC is affiliated and sits in, the Crawford School of Public Policy, and they have what's called a PSP course, which helps prepare PhD students to do their PhD. Yeah, but that's separate from the research elective that we offer as part of the master's program in lieu of electives. Yeah. So there's a question, can these programs lead to career paths outside of the national intelligence community, or, sorry, it's just moved, or even the APS? So actually there's everyone here will have something to say about that. So I'm going to flick to Rory first.
Yeah, the short answer is absolutely, and others will have direct experience of that. I mean, Rachael is sort of living proof of that as well. But bear in mind also that the nature of a lot of careers in security and policy these days are increasingly mobile careers. So we will have grads from our courses who will work within government for a while. They may end up working in the private sector as well. They may end up working overseas. And really important point to understand is that we define national security very broadly at the National Security College as the spread of subjects we offer attests. And so the government agencies, when you think about the security community, don't just think narrowly about defence and intelligence. They're all there in our mix, of course, but we have close relations with departments like climate change, energy and water, with industry, with the Australian Electoral Commission, for example. It's a really broad church, and our students are doing great things in many sectors all over the world.
Absolutely, and I'll just add to that. So one of the areas I do research on is space. And so you might not think about space as purely a national security issue, and it's not, because it also has humanitarian consequences. But you could have a career in space, or a career in natural disaster management, or a career in promoting social cohesion, and that could reasonably be thought to be a career that follows on from national security expertise and understanding the safety and the security of the nation. So it's, as Rory said, it's very broadly conceived. And so you're not necessarily limited to the national security intelligence community or APS jobs as such. It's a conversation we're having more broadly, I think, where national security is something that not just practitioners understand is more broad, but as a community, we're starting to see more conversation around that. So my view is that it is a transferable skill and transferable degree. Anyone else want to chip in on that one? Are we all good? Are there any more comments in the chat? We'll be signing off in sort of a minute or two, but happy to stick around if there are others. So there's one from Kim who says, a bit keen, but I have an opportunity to engage in an internship, but haven't commenced the master's yet. Can I get that accredited? So what you're essentially asking there, Kim, is an application for credit, and all those applications for credit are considered on a case-by-case basis, and they go to Liz and her team, and then they give me a recommendation. And then myself or whoever's in the role at the time will make either approve or decline. So the best thing if you're after a credit is to make that application that will be assessed on its particular merits for that particular case. Did you want to add anything to that, Liz?
Yeah, I mean, we do have a mechanism when people are studying to do an internship that if you've already got an internship prepared. So depending upon when you want to start that, it might be an option that if you haven't enrolled yet in the Masters and you want to do it during your Masters, we have a mechanism to do that for your own internship. Having said that, again, we will look at those things on a case-by-case basis. So, but I think it would be good if you had the option maybe to be able to include that in your master's program while you're doing it. Maybe would be a way to, because we certainly do have a way to credit that towards your master's program.
And thank you, Liz. And to your question, Sebastian, the courses between semesters we call our spring, autumn, or winter or summer subjects. We sort of bridge them between. They're often run in intensive mode, and they tend to be worth 3 units as opposed to 6 units. So they're sort of worth half a subject, but you can do a few of them and therefore accumulate your subjects that way once you've done your 2 big compulsories. I think they're great. I think they're one of the strongest aspects of the degree because they're often very specialised and focused, and they're great for remote students or people who work full-time but can take 3 or 4 days off in a row. So, for example, in the summer, I taught borders, migration and security. We talked about transnational crime and citizenship and identity and transboundary security issues. And I taught that 3 Fridays over a 3-week period. But for example, some of the others that are run, so Rory teaches into one, the future of intelligence, I believe, and that might be run, for example, in a few days in a row. So they do vary. They don't all run at the same time, and they are specific to the teacher. They're often, although not exclusively, taught by our academics who also have other lives, in the sense that they might be practicing somewhere else, and so therefore they can make these 3 days available to do the intensive. So the information and propaganda one at the moment is taught by an NSC senior fellow who has a job in cybersecurity elsewhere, as well as with us. So that's taught in intensive mode. So that's probably all I can say at that point. Did that help at all? Hopefully. Oh, there's a whole bunch of questions that have just popped in there now. So the first one is about struggling with time management. Yes, look, that's something we all struggle with. That's not particular to you or to national security students. It's definitely a human thing. The only thing I can say is that we do have flexible options in terms of part-time or full-time study. And so hopefully that can help a little bit. And then we do also have an academic skills team located in the Crawford School of Public Policy, which is available to National Security College students that can help you with your academic skills if you're finding that transition difficult.
Maybe I'll just jump in, Danielle, on a couple of these questions, just in terms of the graduated with a Bachelor of International Relations, shifted to a Master of Business Information. I think there you would still have to complete part of the Master's program, I could imagine, to be eligible for PhD, but you would probably receive some credit for the international relations, and depending upon what is in the Master of Business Information system. So I would say that you could shorten your Master's program in order to go into the PhD, but someone may have a view on that. And just in terms of a part-time load versus full-time load, look, you can do 1 to 2 units is 1 to 2 courses, is a part-time load, and a full-time load will be considered 3 to 4 courses. So the part-time load, you have, I believe, up to 5 years to complete a graduate certificate and up to 7 years to complete a master's. So that's if you're studying part-time.
Thank you, Liz. The final question, is there an alignment of national security policy and education and skills? I would say that all of us would probably say that yes, there definitely should be. Rory in particular, he teaches a subject, and we offer a subject on the nexus between policy and academia, and that the courses are balanced in the sense of seeking to achieve academic rigor, but also practical perspectives. And I think Jake's example of his assessment that he's designed, which is drawn from, you know, a very senior career in national security, is a great example of that. We are actually at time now, and I don't want to hold anyone off from their children or dinners or what have you. So we will sign off soon, but just before I do, would Rachael, Mike, Jake or Rory like to add anything extra at all? Liz, everyone all good? I would like to thank Rachael and Mike and Jake and Rory and Liz for their time this evening. I know time is precious, as we've just alluded to. Time management is a thing. Particularly Rachael, you're not even getting paid for this. So thank you for giving. Thank you for giving.
You can pay me by giving me that 8022.
Yeah, that's right. We'll find the essay.
Thank you.
So thanks everyone for coming along, and we hope to hear from you soon. Do shoot us queries if you have any further questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Danielle. Look forward to seeing a few new faces at the college.